Hey guys, I wanted to come on here today and talk about my mental health journey. And in the past, I have refrained from talking about mental health because I'm a little worried about offering advice that may do more harm than good or that may not work because I'm not a professional. I can only speak to my own personal experience. But the last few months or this entire year has just been such a crazy time for all of us, and we've all gone through it in one way or another. I felt it was important to come and share my mental health journey, what it was like in the past to where I am today. My hope in all of this is if you have never considered your own mental health seriously, that you possibly recognize similar patterns with my story and maybe start to think about getting the help that you need, or just take away a message of hope from this. So, going back to my childhood where it all sort of began, I grew up in very unique circumstances. And not unique in the sense that nobody else has gone through something like this, but in my circle, I was probably one of the very few people who went through what I was going through at the time. I am an only child, so I have no siblings, and I grew up in a predominantly single parent household, and so my earliest friend, my earliest partner in crime, my earliest form of entertainment was just myself. I was left to my own devices for the most part. Coming to my school, which was the other environment that I spent a lot of time in besides home, I didn't really like my school. I don't think that brought out the best in me, and I definitely had a tough time making friends. I was also extremely sick physically growing up because I struggled with asthma, so I was in and out of hospitals, and I think I was also one of the chubbier kids. In fact, I think I was the chubbiest kid in my class. So all of these factors combined, it just sort of rendered for a very isolating and lonely growing up experience. And I don't mean this necessarily in a bad way. There is some charm to it where I developed a very unique personality that I'm still proud of to date, because I read a lot, I watched a lot of movies, I was one of the youngest thorough readers in my class. But I do remember feeling a few things very distinctly. The first one is, like I mentioned, just the sense of loneliness. The second one was because I was kind of in the shadows as a person. I didn't feel like I was being seen for who I was, or that I was entitled to my feelings and emotions. So whatever I was going through at the time, whatever I was seeing, I couldn't really talk about it to anyone. I didn't feel like I had a right to feel what I was feeling, and I don't think I even understood what I was going through back then. But even if I did, I kind of pushed it to the back and focused on other people and tried to come off very sort of like unaffected and bubbly and happy, because I knew that that was kind of like the ticket to make friends, to thrive in this world. So that's how I grew up, and even coming to college much later, I went through a similar experience. I actually made a great set of friends and we had a lot of fun, but even then, I just remember feeling quite lonely and isolated in my mind, because I didn't think that anyone would understand what I was going through. Even at this time, I was very overweight and sick. I just didn't feel like anyone would relate to me or I could talk to anyone, so I kind of just kept it all inside me. All of this peaked when I much later got my first job and I moved outside my city for the first time. I left my family. A lot of people would consider this the best job in the world, but for me, it ended up being a completely different experience, because not having the maturity to recognize my emotions, deal with them, to talk to people, and to sort of learn and grow in a very social kind of a way, I really struggled in my first job. Just went through a bunch of experiences, even with my physical health. So everything combined, 3 years later, I had to leave my job and come back home, and that's when it all began in all severity, what I call like my real mental health battle. I still remember the date like it was yesterday. It was March 6th, 2016. I woke up in the middle of the night and I had my first panic attack. And the symptoms for me manifested in a very scary way. I was breathless, I was feeling really giddy, and my left arm was completely numb and my back was hurting. More than all of these physical symptoms, the thing that I was feeling inside me was just this inexplicable sense of dread, fear and anxiety that something was about to go wrong, and I couldn't explain what it was. I googled my symptoms Google was telling me the worst things, and that just made me more and more terrified, and I thought I was going to have to be admitted to the hospital. I don't know how that night passed, but that morning I went to my family doctor and I went through a bunch of tests, and he said he couldn't really diagnose me with anything at that time, except that he said, yeah, I think the weight is definitely something that you'll have to fix in the long run, but beyond that, we'll just have to wait and see. So with that, I went back home and I spent the next 2 or 3 days really struggling, because every time evening would come by, my anxiety would come back, and that persistent feeling of dread was just something I could not shake away. So I went back to my doctor. He referred me to a psychiatrist, and in retrospect, I don't know if the psychiatrist experience could be called good or bad. For about 30 minutes, I explained to him all my symptoms and everything that was going on in my life at the time, and he just nodded his head, and towards the end he said, okay, it looks like you have generalized anxiety disorder, here's a prescription. And he gave me a bunch of medicines and I was on my way. I took the medication, went back home and started taking it. In the initial days, the medicine really helped me get through those sleepless nights, but eventually I kind of just stopped taking the medication. Personally, to me, I just sat back and I was kind of evaluating my life, and there were clearly certain things that I needed to fix. So I thought that, I'm going to try and work on these things, and if it still doesn't work and if I still feel anxious by the end of it, I'm going to accept the medication through and through, but I'd like to give it a shot through my own personal efforts before that. Now, at this point, I want to say that that is not the solution for everyone. A lot of people genuinely need the medication because they are struggling through something very, very hard. So I would always encourage that you do what a trusted doctor asks you to do. In all of this, I'm coming to say that the majority of 2016 was the lowest period of my life. I was an anxious wreck. I became a recluse. I wouldn't go out. I wouldn't text my friends, call them, because in my mind, the way I was thinking about it is, okay, if I send a text to my friend today, then something is going to happen to me in the night, and that's the last text that they'll ever receive from me. And that thought or taking that risk was so terrifying to me that I would just refrain from texting them altogether. Towards the end of the year, I think it never really went away, but I had sort of improved on some of those aspects that I was talking to you about, the self-improvement bit. I was able to make some progress in those areas. I started having a very regular workout routine, and I started eating on time, spending a lot of time meditating and trying to align my thoughts. It was a lot of work. I don't really have any 5 tips on how to beat anxiety, but I'm coming to say that I've seen some really, really dark days, but the light at the end of the tunnel is, fast forward to 4 years later, I have gone from having what people would consider the best job in the world and collecting all these trophies to having found a meaningful career that I feel passionately about. And I've gone from having like this amazing network of professional people who can advance my career to having a really strong relationship with my friends and family and people that I really care about. And lastly, I've just gone from just going through a lot of mental battles and not having the maturity to process them, and having very poor physical health, to being in a much better place today where I'm able to make sense of, process, and be stronger about things that are happening. And I could not have done that without finding the right support and guidance from people. Support and guidance can mean your friends and family. It's always great to have a conversation with someone who cares about you and knows you really well, but it's also great to seek a professional and hear an objective perspective on how to deal with these things. So a combination of all of that was what really helped me. I absolutely have no doubt that mental health is a real thing, and that we all go for too long not recognizing our own state. Another thing that really made me emotional was I was recently catching up with a friend of mine, and she is easily the bubbliest, happiest, most vibrant girl I've ever known. And she recently revealed to me that she struggled with bulimia for a year. It was revelatory to me that it's not just me, it's not just one other person, but it is so many people behind closed doors going through things that you cannot fathom. By being conscious and aware and learning more about mental health, I've been able to recognize my triggers. I've been able to implement certain practices that make me better, that make me stronger at coping with day to day. And no matter what I went through and I think I resolved, interestingly, life always throws like a fresh set of challenges at you that you're going to have to navigate. There'll always be challenges, but to that, I definitely believe that there's always a solution and there's always an answer out there. One of my favorite quotes from Harry Potter is help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. For me, that's kind of how I see the world as well. There is always help and there is always an answer, there is always support. You just need to ask for it, you just need to find the right resources. So what I'm going to do is, down below I am going to add a bunch of links to resources and contacts that you can reach out to if you feel like you want to reevaluate and assess your mental health. I hope you don't take it lightly and give it the attention that it deserves. I hope this quick update helps you put your own mental health into perspective, or just leaves you on a high note of hope and positivity. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me. Please subscribe to my channel. I hope to be sharing a lot more about the subject that I'm passionate about. I will see you soon. Bye.